Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. We're continuing on our conversation about the NBA Finals and looking at it from the perspective of the Dallas Mavericks of, at this point, down 0-2. Do they have a chance of coming back? Now, ultimately, it would be pretty foolish to fully rule them out, considering we just a couple years ago saw the Phoenix Suns get out to a 2-0 series lead in the finals against the Milwaukee Bucks and then proceed to lose 4 straight games. But for the Celtics at this point, it is kind of hard to imagine that the team that has gone, I believe at this point, it's 78-20 is their record from the regular season and the postseason, to see that team losing 4 of the next 5 games. Now, is it in play? Absolutely. When you have a player like Luka Doncic, who is, I still believe, even with the results of the first couple games here, that he is the best player in the series, but it is going to be a lot to overcome the depth that is the Boston Celtics. Now, for starters, health could be something that ends up swinging really either way in this series. Luka was listed as questionable headed into game 2 last night, and it was clear that he was dealing with some various stuff. The knee has been something that's bothering him throughout the postseason, but it was, I believe, and that's what Lucas sort of supported, that he's not 100% sure, but he believes it's from when he drew the charge against Jaylen Brown in Game 1, that something in his chest has been off since then. So that's obviously a massive factor. But we did also see Kristaps Porzingis go down in the fourth quarter, come up gimpy. He played through a couple more minutes, but clearly did not have the same speed to him, and he ended up sitting the rest of that game. Now, he came out and gave a quote that if he has to, he will die on the court. So I don't believe it's going to be a matter of whether or not he is available for the Celtics, but it's what level of concern should the Celtics have and what level of production can he give the Celtics after playing a really impactful first couple games, where Porzingis last night had another 12 points. Again, just the size. The shot-making ability at that size is absolutely something that this Dallas defense is having a hard time with up to this point, because Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, they are impactful defenders, but they aren't necessarily super used to, based off of their postseason run up to this point, having to be dragged out onto the perimeter and playing from there. That's where the Celtics have had a lot of success, and it's because Tatum is getting open lanes to drive, and with the big man sort of crashing down as well to help protect the paint, Tatum's been able to kick it out to open three-point shooters in both of these games. Obviously, shots weren't falling for the Celtics in Game 2. And also, Tatum's finishing hasn't necessarily been great. It's been bad, is the better way to put it, throughout these first couple games as well. So that's an adjustment that, again, I understand it gets risky when you're talking about, you want to debate whether or not Tatum or Brown is the best player on the Celtics, but a player that we know can take his game to an elite level from a scoring perspective at times. The consistency of it is what we all have concerns with, but we understand the upside of Tatum is amongst the best players in the league, and if you want to give him these open looks at the rim, what happens if he starts to feel himself? So I understand the drawbacks of it as well. That's probably why Jason Kidd has continued to play the strategy that they just did. Maybe coming off of the bad shooting night for the Celtics last night, they will be comfortable with continuing to double Tatum at the rim. But we saw Drew Holiday with the off-ball cuts that he made throughout that Game 2 as well, that it feels like the Celtics team that has been so caught up in their own habits for years now, they are finally learning to understand the other ways to win. And I believe that that's what last night was for the Celtics. So again, there are obviously adjustments that the Mavericks need to make. One of those being that Luka was looking to attack inside the three-point line a little bit more, get his post-up looks against smaller defenders. That was really working for them in the first half, but especially considering how taxed Luka has been leading the NBA in points throughout this postseason run, that he needs his running mate Kyrie Irving to step up. And in large part, it's just been for lack of being able to knock down the open opportunities. I can double check right now, but I don't believe he has hit a 3 yet in the finals. Combined between the two games, he's 0 for 8. So that's one thing. Obviously, somebody who creates more so off the dribble than in those catch and shoot opportunities. But somebody needs to do it. And I do expect that the Mavericks role players I mentioned in the last segment, PJ Washington, Derek Jones Jr., Josh Green, these guys that have been impactful for them throughout their postseason run, that maybe at home they are able to knock down their shots. It's important to remember in all of this that the Celtics are the core that have been to the finals already. This is the first rodeo for a lot of these players, and especially when you look at the likes of a PJ Washington, who he has spent his entire career up to this, halfway through the season in Charlotte, which was never on any type of a big stage, really. Sorry, Hornets fans out there, not trying to send any shots at you, but you understand the level of pressure and expectations from what these players have experienced up to this point in their career to where they are now is something that is just a different gravity. And the Celtics have experienced it and been on the losing end of it in 2022. Add in Jrue Holiday as well with his ring in 2021. They have been here before. And that's something where, that's why for the Mavericks, this season already does feel like a success and something that they are absolutely, and we still don't know the final result of this series, but for the Mavericks, ultimately, feel like you make a couple changes here and there, and they can be back to contending again next season. But, a lot of people are sort of sitting around and wondering, how is this the team that came out of the Western Conference Finals? And I feel like to some degree, the Celtics may be providing a little bit. And blueprint, listen, I feel like that gets thrown around a lot as well. The blueprint to, there's no stopping Luka Doncic, but, and Luka has been killing the Celtics from an individual scoring perspective. But it's understanding, the Mavericks roster as a whole and their offense. They have two ball handlers in Luka and Kyrie. Kyrie isn't performing, so it is a little bit of that idea of just let the best player get his. And obviously they are still trying to play defense on him. They sent a couple more doubles, it felt like, in the game last night, and as a result we saw some more lobs, at least from 0 in game 1. I believe it was 2 last night, so obviously not tremendous, but that's been a massive part of their offense, and it's been very quiet up to this point. For the Mavericks, we talked about the fact that Jason Tatum is guarding the bigs on the Dallas side, and what that sort of means in terms of, is there anything there that can be exploited? Daniel Gafford went at Tatum a couple times early in that third quarter and scored on both of the opportunities, so that felt like something they could maybe look to a little bit more, but then they stopped. And I feel like it's that in a combination with trying to attack the offensive glass a little bit more. These are thoughts that we put out there last week. And again, marginal improvements last game. But at the same time, it really hurts when Kyrie Irving doesn't play. And I definitely don't want to water it down to Kyrie is the only reason why this isn't working for the Mavericks. But it is, with the amount of talent that the Celtics have, specifically in those top 6 players, it is extremely difficult for the Mavericks to be able to win 4 games against this team if Kyrie isn't going to show up. And I expect him to have a bounce back game at some point here, but the way that the Celtics have been able to match up against him, and the fact that they've had his number for years now. I believe, the infamous stepping on Lucky, the Celtics logo at half court, that whole sort of ordeal in Celtics history. He's 0-12 since then, and I believe that was in 2022. Maybe it was early 2023, but regardless, the Celtics have won their last 12 matchups against Kyrie Irving. And it's gonna be tough. This is, again, I don't want to say legacy defining, but in terms of being able to live up to the expectations that were being put on him through the first couple rounds, in terms of him and Luka being the best scoring backcourt in NBA history. Well, one of you needs, or I mean, I wouldn't say one of you. There's a specific one in Kyrie needs to carry his workload in that type of an instance. And listen, I was never on board with, jumping the gun of winning a couple playoff rounds and automatically calling them the best offensive duo in NBA history. But you look at the skills and they absolutely should be there. But this has been a physical series. It's been clear that the refs have been willing to let a lot slide, you can say, in terms of the physicality. That's something that Luka was, unhappy with in the post-game interview. Jason Kidd talked about the, potential push in the back of PJ Washington on that Derek White block at the end of the game where, PJ Washington had a chance with that dunk to go down to cut it to, I believe at that point it would have been a one-possession game. I think it was a 5-point game at that instance, but either way, again, I feel like it's hard to, just in any of these instances, I always feel like it's lazy to fully blame the refs. The Celtics were bad in that game last night, and the Mavericks weren't able to take advantage. So ultimately, again, I'm not going to fully rule out the Mavericks moving forward here, but that definitely feels like a game if they are to lose the series, and even worse, if they make it closer and they end up losing the series. Game 2 is going to be the one that they really feel the worst about, because that was one that totally slipped through their fingers. As things currently stand on DraftKings in terms of betting odds, the Mavericks are plus 550. So again, uphill battle from here. I don't believe that they do come back, but I would definitely not rule them fully out. But let me know your thoughts on the series and whether or not they have any chance to come back. We're going to be taking our next break here. When I come back, this is a little bit of a silly segment, but I want to sort of, with the performance of Jrue Holiday through these first 2 games and how incredible he's been, I want to sort of look back at the Milwaukee Bucks and their decision to trade him in order to get Damian Lillard, sort of throw in some of the coaching conversation as well there, where they went through a lot of turnover, and talk about whether or not they are feeling regrets and remorse at this point. So stick with us. We will be right back. Don't go anywhere.